Martin would go for his run every morning at 5:30, while Diana would conduct her security check around their house at 6. The townspeople had nicknamed this couple in their 60s the paranoid pair. They would always buy extra canned goods at the supermarket, keep their gas canisters full, and test their home generator every week. It's like they're preparing for doomsday, people would laugh, until that terrible Monday night, when an explosion at the chemical plant engulfed the entire town in dangerous gases. The town's only hope of survival would be the emergency plans of the paranoid pair that many had ridiculed. Welcome to Best Honor Stories. Before we continue, tell us in the comments which city in the world you're watching this video from today, and if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button to help us preserve these valuable memories. Riverdale was a charming little town nestled in the mountainous region of Colorado, with a population barely exceeding 3. With its single main street, small shops where everyone knew each other, famous apple festival, and modest homes housing workers from the nearby chemical plant, it was a typical American town. Just outside town, in a house surrounded by pine trees on the hill, lived the most talked-about couple in town, Martin and Diana Wilson. When they first moved there 5 years ago, everyone had initially welcomed them warmly. The couple in their early 60s were kind and polite people. Martin stood out with his closely cropped gray hair, upright posture, and ever-vigilant gaze. Diana was a woman who wore dark, typically practical clothing, with a sharp intelligence that was immediately noticeable. Just a few months after the Wilsons settled in Riverdale, townspeople began to notice that they were different from others. This difference manifested in their clockwork-like daily routines, the security systems they installed around their house, and their insistence on always being prepared. "You know, Martin Wilson bought 24 cans of beans from Tom's Market yesterday," said Nancy while working at the local hair salon. "Like he's going to feed an army." Barbara nodded as she got her hair done at the salon. Diana also buys first aid supplies from the pharmacy every week. She told Susan she has enough bandages to last for months. "Last Sunday at church, Martin started telling me how to filter drinking water in case of a water outage," added Lisa, rolling her eyes. "As if we've ever had a water outage here." Over time, the overly cautious behavior of the Wilson couple became a source of entertainment among the town residents. Jokes about them were made at bingo nights at the local bar, at the Riverdale Spring Festival, and even at town council meetings. High school students, especially teenagers, would make gestures mocking the couple they called the paranoid pair when passing by their house. Memes about the Wilsons circulated in local social media groups. Normal Monday in Riverdale versus Monday in the Wilsons' minds, with a normal street scene on one side and a post-apocalyptic landscape on the other. Martin and Diana were aware of all the gossip and jokes. Sometimes, while sitting at the cafe in the town square, they would see young people giggling or pointing as they passed by. But interestingly, they never seemed to mind. "No harm ever came from being cautious," Martin would say each time, lowering his newspaper and smiling. "Nothing wrong with being prepared." Diana would respond to the situation with similar calmness. "Do we seem a bit too worried? Maybe, but who knows what tomorrow will bring." The truth was, Martin and Diana Wilson were much more than the townspeople thought. Their past had been shaped far from Riverdale's simple life in some of the world's most dangerous regions. Martin Wilson was actually Colonel Martin Wilson, who had served in Special Forces for 22 years. From Afghanistan to Iraq, from Sudan to Colombia, he had been involved in countless operations and led many rescue and evacuation missions. Starting his career as a sniper, he had eventually distinguished himself with his skills in strategy and crisis management. Diana Wilson, in reality Diana Reeves-Wilson, was a former intelligence officer who had served in an elite unit of the Navy. She was an expert on chemical weapons and had played a critical role in planning many military operations. She had met Martin during a mission, and after they married, they both continued their duties for some time. Both had retired 5 years ago and chosen a quiet town like Riverdale to transition to civilian life. But what they had seen, experienced, and learned throughout their military careers of over 20 years had deeply affected them. Their habits of always being alert and their instinct to be prepared for any situation continued in their civilian lives. The interior of the Wilsons' house had an organization that could never be understood from the outside. Their basement was designed to withstand a long-term crisis. Shelves were filled with non-perishable foods, medications, first aid supplies, and cleaning products. In one corner, there were professional radios that could be used to communicate with the outside world. In another corner, there were water purification systems and portable generators. The greenhouse in their garden, though appearing to be just a hobby, was actually a productive area designed for use in a potential food crisis. In their garage, they always kept 2 vehicles with full fuel tanks, emergency bags, and basic equipment like tents and sleeping bags. All these preparations seemed strange and exaggerated to the residents of Riverdale. After all, their town was a quiet place, far from natural disasters. The last major event was a few days of snowstorm in winter 5 years ago. Even then, the main roads were quickly cleared, and life returned to normal. "You know," said Tom, the market owner, to Diana during her shopping one day, "we don't have such big disasters here. Why are you so prepared?" Diana smiled politely as she placed the canned goods she had taken from the shelves into her basket. "If there's one thing I've learned throughout my life, it's that the most unexpected things can happen at the most unexpected times, Tom." "This is Riverdale, Diana," said Tom, laughing. "The most exciting event was when Dave's cow escaped from the barn and wandered onto Main Street last year." Diana just nodded and continued her shopping. Martin and she knew very well what people didn't understand. Disaster, as always, would come at the most unexpected moment. Monday morning started as usual. Martin went for his run at 5:30, circled the town for 3 miles, and returned home exactly at 6. Diana was already awake, had checked the sensors in the garden, and prepared breakfast. As the day progressed, they felt a change in the air. The wind was blowing stronger than normal, and an unusual smell was coming from the west, from the direction of the chemical plant. In the afternoon, Martin began checking local news channels. Diana was listening to radio frequencies. Both sensed that something wasn't right. Around 4:30 p.m., the first explosion was heard, a muffled boom from a distance, strong enough to slightly rattle the windows of the houses. "From the west of town," said Martin, immediately taking action. "The chemical plant." Diana was already at her computer, checking local news sources. "Nothing on the news sites yet, but the wind is blowing from west to east, Martin." Martin nodded. "That means directly towards town. What do you think?" Diana quickly reviewed her knowledge about the plant's operating principles and the chemicals it produced. Before retiring, she had conducted security assessments at similar facilities. If there was an explosion in the main reactor, toxic gases like nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide could be released into the environment, depending on the wind speed for it to reach town. "How long would it take?" asked Martin, making his own calculations. "An hour, maybe less," said Diana. "Our houses are relatively safe, air filters, insulation, but the other people in town." Martin immediately came to a decision. "We need to warn the mayor. The town needs to be evacuated, or at least everyone needs to stay indoors." Diana considered the Wilson couple's relationship with the town administration. Mayor Robert Jenkins was one of the main supporters of jokes about them. At the last town meeting, he had characterized Martin's proposed emergency plan as unnecessary paranoia. "I don't think they'll take us seriously," said Diana, "but we have to try." Martin immediately grabbed the phone and called the mayor's office. As he expected, the secretary tried to dismiss his concerns. "Mr. Wilson, rest assured, everything is under control. There will be a statement from the facility. Please stay calm and—" Martin spoke politely but firmly. "Miss Reynolds, I know the rate at which chemicals produced in this facility can be carried by wind and their potential health effects. Please tell Mayor Jenkins that the town either needs to be evacuated or everyone needs to stay in their homes, closing windows and doors." The secretary paused for a moment. The authority in Martin's voice had impressed her. "I'll inform the mayor, Mr. Wilson." However, despite minutes passing, there was no callback. Martin and Diana went outside to see the crowd gathering in the town center. People were watching the smoke rising from the distant facility, trying to understand what was happening. No one was thinking about going home or taking precautions. "Time for Plan B," said Martin as they returned to their house. Diana nodded. They both knew what they needed to do. Martin brought out the large Jeep from the garage. Diana loaded the emergency supplies from the basement, gas masks, protective clothing, first aid kits, and water filters into the back of the car. Preparations were completed in 10 minutes. When they arrived at the town square, the situation had worsened. A second explosion had been heard and the smoke had thickened. People were looking at each other anxiously, not knowing what to do. The mayor and a few local officials were trying to calm the crowd, but there was no effective plan. Martin drove the jeep into the middle of the square and plunged into the crowd. Diana was organizing the equipment in the back of the car. Martin approached the mayor, but this time he wasn't polite. "Jenkins," he said, his voice filled with authority, "the gases released from the facility are toxic. The wind is blowing directly towards town. People either need to be evacuated or stay indoors, tightly closing windows and doors." The mayor looked down at Martin dismissively. "Mr. Wilson, I appreciate your concern, but let's not create panic. The facility has yet to make an official statement." Martin interrupted the mayor. "People will be poisoned while waiting for that statement. Listen to me, Robert. Diana and I have been trained for these kinds of situations. We know what we're doing." "Trained?" Mayor Jenkins looked surprised. "What kind of training?" Diana joined them, holding a gas mask. "Military training, Mayor. I was an expert on chemical weapons. I know the chemicals produced in this facility and their effects." The mayor and the surrounding crowd looked at the Wilson couple in astonishment. That crazy, paranoid couple now looked like completely different people. Their posture, speech, even their gazes had changed. "Listen," said Martin, raising his voice. "We have two options. Either everyone goes to their homes, closes windows and doors, and if possible goes to their basements, or we evacuate the town eastward. The second option is riskier because there's a high chance of exposure to gases during evacuation." Diana added, "According to the safety protocols of the facility, you need to stay away from the area for at least 24-48 hours after such an explosion, for the gas to disperse and the danger to pass." Just then, a third explosion was heard from a distance. This one was much stronger than the previous ones, and after it, black clouds of smoke were seen rising from the facility. Panic began in the crowd. People were shouting, screaming, running around, not knowing what to do. It was complete chaos. Martin immediately took action. He climbed on top of the jeep and shouted loudly, "Everyone stay calm. Don't panic. We will help you, but first we need to establish order." His strong, authoritative voice and calm demeanor caught the crowd's attention. People slowly began to calm down. "Now everyone listen to me," said Martin. "The safest option is to stay in your homes, close all doors and windows. If you have one, go to the basement. Place wet towels at the edges of doors and windows to prevent gas from entering." Diana had begun distributing gas masks and protective equipment. "Use these especially for children, the elderly, and those with respiratory problems," she told those around her. The mayor was stunned by the organizational ability of the Wilson couple. After a moment's hesitation, he asked Martin, "How can I help you?" Martin quickly formulated a plan. "Let's divide the town into zones. Let's form a team responsible for each zone. These teams will go to homes to tell people what they need to do and identify those who need help." Diana added, "Also, we need to establish a center. The school building could be ideal. Its basement is spacious and protected. We can direct those who can't stay safe in their homes there." The mayor nodded at the professional approach of the Wilson couple and immediately began giving orders. The police chief, fire crew, and volunteers began organizing according to the instructions of the Wilson couple. Within an hour, the entire town had mobilized. Martin, Diana, and volunteer teams were going house to house, guiding people. Diana was particularly concerned with the safety of vulnerable groups, the elderly, children, pregnant women, and patients. Martin was managing the general organization. In the evening hours, the wind intensified, and the first toxic gas clouds began to reach the town. Anyone who remained outside began to experience throat burning, eye-watering, and difficulty breathing. But thanks to the quick intervention of the Wilson couple, most people were safely protected in their homes or in the basement of the school building. Throughout the night, the Wilson couple didn't sleep. They continuously monitored the situation, intervened for those in need, and coordinated with emergency teams. Diana was tracking the density of chemical gases and their spread rate. Martin was constantly keeping communication lines open, requesting help from the outside world. Towards morning, the wind changed direction, and the gases slowly began to disperse. State emergency teams reached the town in the morning hours. Martin and Diana presented them with a detailed situation report and handed over control. When the sun rose, it became clear that Riverdale had survived a major disaster. The area around the facility was completely devastated. Many homes and businesses had been damaged, but in the town center, thanks to the quick and effective intervention of the Wilson couple, there had been no serious loss of life. A few people had been taken to the hospital, but their conditions were stable. The mayor invited Martin and Diana to the town hall. With a tired but proud expression, he said, "We don't know how to thank you. If it weren't for you," Martin interrupted the mayor. "We did what we had to do, that's all." Diana smiled kindly. "We've been trained for these kinds of situations for years, Mayor. We just used our training." Mayor Jenkins asked curiously, "So, you really are?" Martin and Diana looked at each other, then turned to the mayor and others in the room. "I'm Colonel Martin Wilson, Special Forces, retired," said Martin. "I served for 22 years, mostly in crisis zones, in evacuation and rescue operations. And I'm Captain Diana Reeves-Wilson, Navy Intelligence, retired," said Diana. "I'm an expert on chemical weapons and hazardous materials." Everyone in the room was shocked. That crazy, paranoid couple were actually military personnel who had served their country for years, participating in the most challenging missions. "But why didn't you tell us?" asked the mayor. Martin shrugged. "We wanted a quiet retirement life. We wanted to leave our past behind," Diana added. "Also, we weren't concerned about how people saw us. We knew what we were doing." It didn't take long for the news to spread. Within hours, the entire town had learned the true identity of the Wilson couple. People who once mocked them now looked at them with gratitude and respect. The next day, the local newspaper came out with the headline, "Riverdale's Secret Heroes." The article told of the Wilson couple's military background and how they saved the town. On social media, young people who once mocked them were now sharing their photos and using the tag "Real Heroes." A week later, a ceremony was held in the town square. All Riverdale residents were there. The mayor presented the Wilson couple with the key to the town and declared them honorary guardians of Riverdale. Martin and Diana were modest as always. Martin gave a short speech. "We just did our duty. Any of you would have done the same," Diana added. "What's important is to support each other as a community and be prepared for any situation. We hope everyone learns something from this event." After the ceremony, the Wilson couple returned home. They were no longer known as the paranoid pair, but as the heroes of Riverdale. But for them, life continued almost the same way. Martin continued to go for his run at 5:30 every morning, and Diana continued to conduct her security check around their house at 6. The only difference was that now people greeted them, bowed respectfully, and occasionally asked for advice about emergencies. The town, with the Wilson couple's recommendation, prepared a comprehensive emergency plan. Basic supplies for each home were listed. Evacuation routes were determined, and regular drills were planned. Riverdale was now not just a charming town, but also a community prepared for potential crises. A month later, at a barbecue party held at Martin and Diana's house, Mayor Jenkins raised a glass. To two paranoids who proved they weren't paranoid, Diana politely responded, "Not paranoia, but preparedness. And believe me, being prepared is always best." Martin quietly added, "Because life can test you at any moment, and when that test comes, those who are prepared survive." The residents of Riverdale raised their glasses and shouted in unison, "To being prepared." The Wilson couple looked at each other and smiled. The lessons they had learned and applied over many years had finally been understood by others. Now I ask you, have you ever known someone like Martin and Diana Wilson? Someone misunderstood, perhaps belittled by society, but actually possessing extraordinary abilities and background? Share in the comments, because these stories need to be remembered, these people need to be honored. Thank you for watching Best Honor Stories. If this story touched you, share it, subscribe, and help these silent heroes' voices continue to be heard. We'll see you in the next story.